The reason we've come into my garage now is to give you a review of the H2 SX SE Plus, and I can tell you what it's like because I've had the H2 SX SE, so I can tell you how it compares. So with the H2 SX SE, I had that for nearly 2 years, and it was just over 2 years in fact, and I did 16,500 miles touring on it. So I've got a really good idea what it's like. And the SX SE Plus that I have now, I've literally done 200 miles. So yeah, with this bike, the SX Plus, SE Plus, I've been down to Devon on it, and I've done a couple of 100 miles, and you can really then get to know what the difference is compared to just the plain, well, it's not even plain, but the SE model compared to the Plus. And there's quite a difference in the two. And as I said, as I've now been on these bikes for the last 2 years plus, then I can sort of give you a really good idea about it. Obviously the SE Plus, you can really, just from a visual point of view, there's really no difference in the looks apart from when you get down, see the new showy forks, the Stylema Brembos, and it's got some of the, like the air intakes are grey, and some of the side decals are grey on it as well. I've got an aftermarket power bronze screen. Just looks, I think it looks quite nice, but it already comes as standard with the touring screen, which is a really good screen. But with the bike, I saw some bloke who just took one of these out for a test drive, and he obviously, you can't really tell what these bikes are like if you just spend a couple of hours or half day out on it. It's just not a really good review. And the bloke looked at the Brembo brakes and he said, oh, they just feel really, they must be really cheap and rubbish. Now these are the top of the range Stylema brakes, and the reason he said that is because they have a very uncanny feel about them. And so the difference between the SE and the Plus is when you brake on the SE, the forks dive like any bike does, so it's quite dramatic when you brake. You certainly know when you brake hard on any motorbike, but especially on one of these because there's a lot of weight. But look, when you brake with these, the semi-active suspension, it stiffens up. There's no drama from the front end. It just brakes but doesn't dive, and it gives this uncanny feeling that it's not braking as hard because there's not so much drama. So that's one thing to say, that the brakes are phenomenal. And I was riding this in the wet, and I rounded a corner, so it's got all the leaning ABS, and it was absolutely peeing down with rain. North Devon, A39, I think the road is coming back from to Bridgewater from Ilfracombe, which is quite busy, and I had to do a full-on stop just exiting a corner because someone was turning right, and it dealt with it beautifully. And the brakes, the ABS, you really don't hear the ABS. The only time you do, the same as the old bike, is if you are stomping on the back brake on a very slow corner, you might hear the clunk from it, but the rest of it's fine. I wanted to say something about the tyres as well. This has got the standard tyres, and the Battle Axe, and I've had these before, and they're not bad. When I say they're not bad, they're a good all-round tyre, but it's got 1,600 miles on it. This one, I bought it as a demo, so it's now got nearly probably got nearly about 1,800 on now, and the front tyre is pretty squared off already. Now I can tell you that the different tyres that I've had, the Metzler Road Techs, are absolutely brilliant and last for a good 5,000 miles odd, even with sort of hard riding. And I put the Road 5s on the last bike, but I just didn't get to run them in. So I would definitely run with the new Techie Road 5s or the Metzlers, because the Metzler, just you get a really good feel through the tyres. And again, another person did a review, said you don't get much feeling through the front. I beg to differ with a change of tyre. So if you do get the Metzler, you'll get a really good front end feel with the bike. Let's talk about the semi-active suspension. You can tell it's semi-active because of the top of the forks. As you see, you've got the all the electronics in them, but it's really good. One of the issues that I had with the old bike, and obviously it's an absolute out-and-out, the old bike being an out-and-out sports tourer, it had to have a compromise with the suspension. It has to be sporty and toury. So it was I would say fairly on the sporty side, and that was great. So when you're doing your mile munching down the motorway, not a problem at all, and on the great A roads. But when I was doing lots and lots of miles, and you're getting on some sort of more Nadgery B roads, it gets really tiring with that on the SE, with the suspension being as hard as it is. And you do end up, you go over a pothole and it bangs in the pothole, you know about it. So this new suspension is absolutely fabulous. So we took a road on the way back to Bridgewater from Lynmouth Linton, and it's quite a technical road overlooking just on the coast, north coast of Devon, overlooking the sea, but it's very bumpy. And so I put the bike in rain mode, which was a really soft mode, and it just made the whole road trip, that part, really, really pleasant. You didn't come off it feeling tired and having to sort of it's like makes your teeth judder. They're so hard. So to be able to do some of the really bumpy B roads in absolute comfort was absolutely lovely. So it's a massive thumbs up with having the suspension that you can change. So rain mode, nice and soft. You've got your own rider mode, you can make it even softer. And again, we came back and we had to do a couple of the sort of little country lanes, which are normally terrible on the bike, really, really bumpy, and you don't want to be on them for long. But this one, just stick it in rain mode, nice and soft, and it just made it really, really pleasant, and you could get along a lot better. So the whole trip with that active suspension is so much easier. I find it quite hard. It's hard to change the suspension setting when you're going along. You have to throttle off and it takes a couple of seconds. So you're off the throttle for a couple of seconds, which is a bit of a pain. So when you've got your mates behind you, you don't want to be sort of fiddling with it. It won't just change that easily. But yeah, so it's an absolute plus point. And again, as I said about the braking with the diving and the accelerating, I didn't really notice the composure on the accelerating, but supposedly it stiffens up, but that felt just exactly the same as the SE. The other thing I wanted to speak to you about was the exhaust on the bike. Obviously the standard exhaust on here is a big old beast. I took that off. Now it's really hard to get any decent sound out of these bikes at a standstill, and what people don't realise, so this has got a Yoshi on. And I'll tell you why I like this Yoshi compared to the other bike where I had a Scorpion. So if you rev this bike up on standstill, it sounds like a bag of nails when you start it up. They always do for the first couple of seconds, and they sound pretty dull, to be honest with you, even with a exhaust, because of the cat. And you rev it and it sounds fairly ordinary. And the reason for that is because the supercharger's not whirring up, and it's only when you go along that you overtake someone and people go, wow, that sounds amazing. It's got a massive deep grunt sound to it. So don't expect to sit in a showroom or outside a showroom and rev it up and think that sounds crap, because until that supercharger's blowing, then you won't hear it. Now that exhaust, the standard one is as it is, just standard. I put a Scorpion on the last bike and it's too high pitched, so it didn't suit the bike. It was irritating to other riders. But the Yoshi has got a deeper sound. and it really does sound menacing. It's only a little bit deeper, but enough to put hairs on the back of your neck, you know, when it gives people a shock when you go past them. So yeah, if you're going to put an exhaust on it, then the Aquaprovic that you can get with it, or stick on a Yoshi, I would highly recommend, and I'd highly recommend that to the other bike too. General stuff to tell you about really. I went through a chain. I should have changed it earlier, so about 16,000 miles. It was really up for its change, my old bike. So you've really got to look after the chain on these, and realising with a new bike with only 1,600 miles on and new sprockets, it's absolutely amazing how much of a difference it makes. The little clunks, the short pickup is absolutely incredibly smooth. So I recommend that if you do buy one of these bikes used, that you make sure that the chain and the sprocket, what the chain and the sprocket wear is, because it's crucial to how it feels throttling on and off. Because at the moment, like all these bikes, these new bikes, when they throttle off, they pretty much cut the fuel, so you can find it quite on and off snatchy. And it's quite smooth on this bike, on the SE Plus, because I think the chain and sprockets are all in good order and they're properly adjusted. So just make sure that you get that right. There is something very different on this bike that I didn't realise in the Plus, that the quick shifter's so much smoother up and down. They must have changed something on the electronics. If you got the quick shifter wrong, you know, you need to be shifting to use a quick shifter to make it smooth, but it always was a bit jerky if you didn't have enough revs. If you're throttling off, you know, coming down to a stop pretty fast and you're coming down the gears with a quick shifter, it's great. But if you weren't, and you were just riding normally on one of these bikes, and you came down, you get a clunk with it. But this quick shifter on the Plus is a lot better. I have no idea why. I'm sure it's changed, but it's ultra smooth. Now, as for the rest of the bike, panniers, etc., it's all the same. I'm unsure whether the pannier stays, when you open the pannier sides, whether they are a little bit more robust. They look like they are, and the other one snapped. So be really careful putting anything in this pannier, especially where it's leant over on a side stand. So don't put any weight on this outside edge, and you can snap the pannier stay, which is a right pain in the neck. Other things to mention about the bike, I had a rear wheel bearing go, and that's principally why I changed it. Now, it was exactly the same time that this Yamaha dealer in Scotland changed the tyres. To me, that it couldn't have been a coincidence that I ended up with a wheel bearing go on 50 miles of having a new tyre, and I don't know what they did to it, but yeah, that wasn't good at 16,000. The services again are going to be the same on these, but that 15,000 service is going to be immensely big when it comes around, so you have to bear that in mind. Insurance didn't seem to be any different on insurance. It's bloody expensive. I'm a 50-year-old bloke, and it's the most expensive insurance I've ever had on a bike. All right, I've had a claim a couple of years ago where I wrote off a multistrada single vehicle accident on gravel, which obviously kills you, but it's still painfully expensive. It's not for the faint-hearted, these bikes. You've got with this a Rideology app as well, they call it. So the displays are slightly different, all the displays. It's a pain in the neck that it's only the black and white touring display that you get a how many miles you've got left in the tank. And I don't know why they don't put them on the other displays. It's just stupid, I think, not to, and that's always a pain in the neck. You've got an app on your phone, and you can change a load of settings on the suspension. So if you're into that kind of thing, then it's absolutely perfect for you, and it's really easy to do. For me, I'm not really that interested. Once I know what I like on my suspension, you've got 3 rider modes that you can tweak. plus you can make your own mode. And the one thing to say is these ride modes. They've got sport, road, and rain, and then your own. Well, there's a pain in the arse, I think, with all of these, is that when you go into rain mode, it gives you like half engine power and an easier throttle, and 3/4 engine power in road. Or, there's all these different power modes on your throttle, and I just turn them off because I want 100% power. I've got a right hand. I know how to use it, and I hate having the throttle played with. When you're so used to how a throttle works on a bike like this, to then have it that it slows up, and you're trying to throttle harder, it's just really difficult. And in my mind, it's a bit more dangerous because you're sort of not used to how the throttle works when you find your throttle's working slower. So in essence, I'm going to change on this one all of it to full power, so I get a full throttle, so all the settings. I just think that's ridiculous. If you can't ride a bike with full power in the rain, then I don't think you should be riding one of these bikes, because it's about how you ride it, not about the bike. It's not, unless you're an absolute idiot. But if you're an idiot, you shouldn't be riding them, to be fair. I want to tell you a bit about the power delivery on the bike. Now, it really does it winds up. That's the best way to say it, from sort of 5,000 or 6,000 revs onwards. So you are getting into the territory. If you're flying about in your 60, 70 mile an hour zone, you're in second gear. There's a lot going on. You get a lot of boost pressure. You're in 6,000, 7,000 revs, and it's ready to go. And this thing absolutely bullet flies. So it's on, off, on, off. So when you're on it, there's no compromise. You are being, you're throttling just a little throttle like that at 7,000 revs, and you are being propelled into the distance. That's the same on both bikes. Absolutely nothing's changed. It's really important to note that most bikes, like our ZZR 1400, the throttle, the best way to describe it, your acceleration goes up smoothly and maybe tails off a bit. This doesn't. The acceleration builds as the faster you go. So the acceleration goes like that. It's like a curve going upwards. So it starts to accelerate faster and faster. It's a very really exhilarating feeling, but it can leave you at a rapid rate of acceleration up to a corner. And it takes a lot of getting used to on the SX and SE. So you come from a sports bike, or I've ridden CBR 600s and bits, and you fairly know what you're dealing with. But these things takes a lot to realise. You need a lot more distance up to a corner. If you're going to go flying up to it, you're going to be presented at a corner at a rapid rate of knots. You've got the best brakes going, obviously on this bike with the stylemas, but you are still trying to bring 264 kilograms on this new one to a stop. And when you try that, you know about it. Well, anyway, I think that's about all we need to know, or you need to really know about the bike, especially the comparison between the Plus, this one, and the SE. And it's really about having the nice suspension changes, so to be able to make the rest of the rides really, really comfortable when you're not flying about in sports mode. I like it because I know that when I go over to Wales, we go near Devil's Bridge and we go over the back road to Ryder, which is really, really bumpy, but a lovely touring road, a lovely road to look out and tour on. It's not a nice bike to do it on, but now I know if I put it in rain mode, because you're going to be going quite slow, or tour mode, I'm going to have a really nice suspension ride going over, which is great. So yeah, it's obviously it's a stunning bit of kit. I bought this as a demo, new, with this all touring stuff and performance parts. It's probably 24,000 quid. They've probably got deals on them now. Would I buy a Plus instead of a SE? 100%. 100% I would. Very simply to have that suspension. When you're sat on the bike, feels, you know, when you're sat on it looking at the cockpit, it seems the same, but it's only when you go touring on it or, you know, do some decent rides that you realise just how much of a difference that suspension makes. Usual stuff on the bike, I get about, if I'm thrashing the hell out of the bike, then I'm probably going to get 130 miles out of the tank. If you're taking it a steady tour, you can get up to about 170. It's that dramatic. So it really depends whether you are flying around in second gear, which you might be if you're up, you know, in Scotland somewhere where I was touring the last bike. So definitely bear that in mind. Remember the tyres, change the tyres, get either the Metzler Road Techs, or I'm told those Pilots 5s, which I'm going to try on this, is well worth doing. And then the other real bits I've done to the bike is, like, I've got the little Givy tank ring that goes on top of there, just to make it easier. I used to have a top box, and this isn't really important to say, the Givy top box on the SE, and the arms snapped on it, and they are big metal arms. It sticks out the back massively, and it looks absolutely stupid. I wish I'd never put it on. So I'm definitely not going to tour with a top box. I'm just going to use a roll bag over the back, and I'm not sure that it was that robust, to be honest, to break metal arms on it. They just both fatigued and snapped. That's it. To summarise the SE and the SE Plus. The SE Plus is definitely the one to buy, purely down to having the versatile suspension.